1,000 books every 3 months. Um, I try and send them to libraries. My office, NDTV, refuses to take any more, so I send them to schools, orphanages. I've helped furnish several small and terribly smart boutique hotels in Rajasthan by donating thousands of volumes. And the latest consignment, I'm so happy to tell you, is going to Delhi's biggest jail, which is called Tihar.
Very good.
You know, writers are a feral, anxious breed, as I had said last evening, and the sort of the the business of writing involves sequestering oneself and producing prose. So the public persona of a novelist becomes a dimension of the writer's life that has in this age has a very different character from even 50 years ago, 40 years ago. You don't need to go back a century. Do you feel that when you speak to writers, they're willing to chat? Are they able to chat? And I mean, are you so good that you can get them to bear their soul, or do you get sort of just a veneer, the scrim of the writer's life?
I don't think I'm good at all. I think it's very good of writers to talk to me. And to tell you the truth, when the idea for the show was proposed in late 2004, I was positively panic-stricken. I thought, I gave it 6 weeks at the most. How do you fill up half an hour, week after week, in what is essentially a very visual medium with the subject of the printed page or artists' voices, which are very reticent, as you point out? Artists don't, it's not that they're secretive. Some may be superstitious, but they're shy about writing. Writing is the process of writing is a very difficult thing to articulate. And why should writers be expected to do it when their books are out there? So I thought 6 weeks, okay, 13 weeks is what Just Books would last, and I'd be rapidly unemployed, which I've previously been on many occasions, and I'll have to find something else to do. But that's the astonishing thing, the difference between writers and readers. Readers want to know more about writers. Viewers want to know more about writers. They don't just want to know about the books they read. They want to know how the book was made, where it came from, what happened in the writer's life.
Sunil, but I mean that's really interesting, because I think what we're talking about is about the relationship between the writer and his reader, and that's where you play such an interesting part, because I think that there's that in a way readers feel that that authors are these horrible monsters, and that somehow they need to be protected from them, and that they need intermediaries to sort of facilitate their relationship with writers, and I think that's in some way true. I mean, as is proven by the success of your show. So it's a fascinating question. I mean, but somehow writers and readers, it's supposed to be a sort of a one-to-one relationship in which I write it, you read it, but somehow it is necessary that there be that has to be problematized in some way, by people like you and by critics and by all sorts of people. It's fascinating. It's fascinating that there should be the necessity for this sort of larger engagement, which is so yeah.
Well, I think both writers and readers, of course, it's a one-on-one relationship. You hold the book in your hand, and you turn the page, and you return the page to go back and reread something you haven't understood. That's the great value of a book. It's a very intimate and intense experience, but sometimes, I'm not saying always, readers need an interlocutor, a halfway house. And perhaps writers do too. And I merely see my role as that of a halfway house between writer and reader. And I must say, Just Books has gone on and on and on because the viewers won't leave me. And writers have been pretty quick to catch on.
Yeah. Philosophically, you know, I am very wary of interfacing with my audience outside my book. I find myself uncomfortable in interviews, especially in the media, because a incarnation, a permutation of me is that I have no control over, sort of is beamed and decimated into television sets, and the whole process I find very unsettling. But in this sort of savage, distracted age, where other mediums are vying for a reader's attention, one is compelled to interface with the audience in another way. I am curious, though. I think you are very good. I mean, your success is a function of the way you are, the way you question. I'm curious. Are there tricks? Some tricks you can share with us? How do you get people who are sequestered for 8 hours out of their heads, out of their rooms?
You know, I described this in great detail, this so-called interviewing technique, or the journalist being, as it were, on a hunt for a quarry. Some of it is true. All journalists, like all writers, including yourself and Daniel, are perpetually in search of a story. Just as you need to get your book out in pursuit of a story, I too need to get a show out. And just as you and Daniel and all the writers here will go to great lengths in their research or interviewing, and you yourself have composed Homeboy out of pretty intense bouts of interviewing, hanging out with cabbies in New York to get their lingo, to get their life. You were employing a journalistic technique too, though for purposes of fiction.
I guess you're sort of partly talking about the fact that writers can be prima donnas. And I think that that's such crap. I mean...
No. But it is true some writers can be prima donnas, but
hold
they
on,
have the
hold on.
right to be.
We're selling,
but they have the right to be
we're
prima
selling a
donnas.
product. You know, I don't get this whole thing that, you know, Jhumpa Lahiri doesn't give television interviews. It's so stupid. No, this woman, she's selling a product. You know, I made this thing, now I want you to buy it. Well, then go on TV and sell it. I don't get it. I don't know.
That's choice. That's individual choice.
It's a matter of temperament as well, Daniel.
But why, you know, when you're selling Coca-Cola, you're not allowed to have a temperament. Why is it that you're selling a book, you're allowed to have a temperament?
I'm enjoying this very much because it exonerates me completely.
I think the analogy between Coca-Cola and a novelist is tenuous.
I'm just trying to get things
It's a
started
bit
here.
extreme.
But, you know, Vladimir Nabokov was temperamentally kind of wary of this variety of attention. And he's famous for, I think he did one live interview on TV and never again did he do that.
But Hussain, if we're going to talk about Nabokov, I mean, Nabokov is famous for the fact he's the man who wrote Lolita. And he went through and said, I don't believe in Freudian analysis. I mean, so obviously this guy had some skeletons in his closet that he was afraid of sort of disclosing. So I don't think we should start using him as the sort of exemplar of how the relationship between writers and their audience as mediated through the media.
Had Sunil Sethi been around, perhaps he would have been able to draw Nabokov out of Montreux, Switzerland. And,
Exactly.
I don't know about that, but I also think I've been, I really haven't actually had a writer who's walked away from the interview in 6 years, which I take as a compliment. But you know, sometimes finding and persuading writers is pretty hard work. And sometimes, too, very funnily, you find them in the least likely places.
so I'm curious about the bromides you employ and how you coo and convince.
I don't coo.
Come on, Sunil, please.
I think, of course, you have to be charming, you have to be sympathetic. But I think the key to interviewing a writer is to listen, to pay attention. And I described the technique, which is not a series of tricks, as Daniel would like you to believe. I described the technique I employ, which is to really, first of all, like everyone in search of a story, do your homework completely. Then to panic all night or early morning till I'm sweating. Then the next hour is spent restraining my panic. Because if I arrived at an interview unsure and nervous, and unsmiling and anxious, it would transmit it to my guest. So you have to work at being composed, prepared, and then I like to spend at least half an hour or 40 minutes before the cameras start rolling. And I chat to them. I ask for every clarification I need. I think of myself really as a beginner, a novice, a student. And I'm never afraid to ask or make a fool of myself before the cameras start rolling. Did you really write this novel in such and such way? Is this really what you said to so-and-so once before? How did this character emerge? You'd be amazed how that increases the comfort level of your subject. And this is also true of great minds. I always say at the end before we start, by the way, have I missed something out? Is there something you'd really like me to ask you? And there's a very funny story I tell here of the great Nobel laureate, the economist and social philosopher Amartya Sen, who I was interviewing not long ago about his book called The Idea of Justice, which is in fact a very dense and complicated but brilliant philosophical treatise about forms of justice, global justice. Can justice be delivered at what? And frankly, I really literally was trying to close my pores to stop myself from perspiring from not just panic but sheer fright, because here is this great man, here is a book I don't understand completely. How am I going to conduct this half an hour? But you know, so great are the Nobel laureates and the great minds of the world like Nadine Gordimer, Amartya Sen, Ramchandra Guha, the historian. Don't forget, these are men and women who've spent their lives standing on platforms, addressing huge faculties on great global issues. And so they see their job to put their interlocutor at ease rather than the other way around. And I tell this story about Professor Sen. I said, sir, is there anything I've missed out after having gone through the whole thing? And he said, fine. I said, is there anything you'd like me to ask? And he said, yes. Can you please ask me one question? So I said, sir, what? And he said, can you please ask me a question of the state of politics in Bengal? I come from that place and it's very dear to my heart. And the current state of Bengali politics boggles my mind and many other great minds. So ask me. So I asked him. And he just let fly against the communists, who ruthlessly ruled Bengal for more than 30 years. So I think that's, would you call that a trick?
You have spoken about great minds. What about some lesser minds? Jeffrey Archer's on the list, for instance. Are they easier?
And after,
Sorry,
after
Emily.
this, we'll open the floor to questions.
I'll just answer that one question about Jeffrey Archer. Let me tell you, Jeffrey Archer is a writer later. He's a politician first. And his past, very well documented by the media, and please thank the media, is so full of so much skullduggery that he has been in every known scandal, from supporting prostitutes to having vast funds from the Conservative Party disappearing, dodging shares. I mean, he has one of the most dodgiest, well-known political careers, to the extent that Private Eye magazine used to famously nickname him Lord Archhole. He's the easiest interview because he has all the standard, he's the trickster, not me. He has all those subtle and smart and super cool evasions of a professional politician. So that brings out the best in a journalist.
Any questions?
Come on, guys.
Over there? Yes, if you can just use the mic, please.
In those 25 books a week or so that you're given, there must be a bunch you don't like. Do you continue to review them and then interview the writers? How do you do that?